Bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Transcription services provided by transcribeme.com. Episode 532, Better Media Valuation. Monday, February 18th, 2019. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. Exactly how much do we understand the value of the media we buy or sell? Turns out, not a lot. Buys get done every day, both directly and programmatically, that sometimes significantly under or overvalue the media. How do we fix this? We'll discuss. Also, whether new tech is the sole reason for in-housing, what consolidation may mean for podcasting, how MasterCard got an audio logo, plus this week's AdFail 5. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and principal of Beetle Moment Marketing, voice marketing champion, Ms. Emily Binder. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Bob. Thank you for having me back. I'm really excited that you included a voice marketing topic on the show.
I always do for you. At least I try to. Now, next, we welcome Senior Vice President Innovation at Gray, New York, Ms. Alexa DePasquale. Alexa, welcome back.
Hey, Bob. Thanks again so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Love having you on the program. And another person we love having on the program, we have the VP Strategic Sales at Marketing Insights Company JumpShot, Mr. Eli Goodman. You're back after all this time.
Bob, it's been so long, but I am very excited. Looking forward to it.
And finally, we welcome back the co-founder of Marketing and Innovation Consultancy, the HMS Beagle, Ms. Lynn Power. Hi, Lynn.
Hey, thanks. Great to be here.
Well, we've got a real meaty topic to start off with today, and it's probably way over my pay grade and probably way over all of our pay grades, except maybe Eli. Eli may be the one person who understands this. But Ben Feldman writes in Adweek that the fact that 40 cents of every digital advertising dollar spent goes to a middleman is not a sign of a broken market, but rather a sign that there isn't a market at all. Now, he argues that while solutions like programmatic copy Wall Street transactionally, they don't provide real-time information on market forces that affect the value of the media. So basically, we're brokering deals with arbitrary bids based on current demand with no consideration of the future value or the actual performance of the advertising in question, all of which could mean significant over- or underpayment on a consistent basis. So, Eli, exactly how much of an issue is this for both publishers and advertisers? I mean, I've known that this was a problem for a while. I mean, I've talked to a number of people in the media space, and they've mentioned to me that this is an issue. But is there ever going to be a reasonable path toward correcting it? I mean, it's just like, it's a really interesting article, but is there any real way to solve this problem?
So this is definitely a complex question. So let me address it in a few different ways. I think the first one is I hear the same thing all the time, right? From both the buy side and the sell side, that everybody is having a very difficult time figuring out how to be able to value the media. And as you had said, either underpaying or overpaying. What I really liked in some of the, our prep discussion around this was talking about how Wall Street prices in future value. Right, because that is actually something near and dear to my heart. I have this on an ongoing thread, I guess, with my friends in Wall Street versus us here in tech. And I feel like it comes down to simplify, my thoughts, is that it does come down to Wall Street has a generally agreed upon set of success metrics and measurement of said metrics on both sides of the transaction. Right, there are things like EBITDA or MAUs or DAUs, subscribers, profits. I mean, again, we could list out all the different type of stuff. And then they're able to do a very good job on both sides of that of figuring out what is the long-term value, because they have a lot of measurement historically about how predictive those metrics are towards the future value. And then that's built into the cost of an equity, the price tag, and then it's up to you to be able to decide based on all of that what your qualitative assessment is. Now, I've always felt that it's much tougher to come by in online media because there are so many varied types of success metrics across, call it like let's say the 3 or 4 hands, I guess, that exist here. You have the brands themselves, and then the ad agencies. You have the tech companies in the middle. We talk about programmatic, and then the publishers or the SSPs or whomever, but call it buy side versus sell side. And so it becomes very, very difficult, is that every single campaign has a different set of success metrics. So how do you go about dealing with that?
Right, right. I mean, you add into that the complication that the publishers and the buyers are not really talking to each other. They're not really giving an insight into why deals don't get done or do get done, and what the valuation is. It's so arbitrary in so many ways.
Yeah, I totally agree, right? It's like sometimes you just kind of throw your finger in the wind and you're like, how much you got? Well, how much how much inventory do you have left? So I'll say this, right? Because this is something that we certainly work on, and in my past couple of decades in the tech industry, something we work on is about defining the success metrics, but really about how do you go about measuring it, right? Because I feel that measurement, as much as it tends to fall towards the brands and the agencies, right? They tend to be the ones that are they have the money, they're the buy side, and it becomes incumbent upon them to be able to measure the success. I actually think that it's a bit more incumbent upon the publishers themselves, because for the publisher, the success metric is relatively straightforward, right? Sell more ads, right? At a better price,
Right,
as
right.
opposed to whatever it's going to be. And there's actually, so your point back at the beginning, and I don't want to go too long in the tooth, but your point back at the beginning about, is there a path for us to be able to get to this? I do believe that it does exist. It's just the shifting landscape about how to go about measuring things as opposed to just surveying and really deterministically defining how well did an actual ad work, is we have reached a point that does exist. There are different, say, publishers that I work with or speak to on a regular basis that do have the operation in place to be able to handle it, so they could actually say, this was the value of the ad after it had been viewed, because it actually drove search activity or purchases or whatnot across more than just that client's website, across Amazon or Walmart or any place else that they may sell.
And also taking a hard look at what it is on an average across all the buyers, so that, one advertiser may perform really well in the media while another doesn't, and being able to average that out. Does that add any additional insight into the value of the buy, or is that useless information?
It comes in handy, I'll say, when people want norms, right? When it comes
Right.
to at least give me a sense in my industry, because certainly, again, a success metric or value of an ad for an automotive, like the buying of a car, is going to be much different than buying a pair of shoes. So I would say that baseline, the benchmark, is
But
certainly worthwhile.
isn't that what we're going for? We're going for some kind of baseline pricing, some kind of understanding of what the base value of the ad is, so that we're getting the right price set on every ad that's being served out, so that the publisher doesn't get screwed and the advertiser doesn't get screwed. You just end up with a good transaction that's appropriately valued. Doesn't that take averages?
Listen, averages absolutely play into it. I just think it really is about, who does it benefit to be able to spend the extra money in order to be able to get to that on an ad by ad basis. I feel like a lot of it is like large swaths. So that just goes back to my point about it being, I feel it's incumbent upon the big publishers, in order to spend the money to be able to come up with a much better valuation, because it serves them and it serves their clients, which in the end, people will spend more money with you if it works, if you could actually prove it. So that's just, that would be like where I would put the focus. The sell side.
Lynn, I'd love to get your thoughts on the direct buying part of this equation, because it's fine and good to talk about the programmatic side of this, that somehow that ads are not being appropriately valued when you're talking about a computer transaction that's going at high speed. But this also impacts direct buying. I mean, we base our prices not based on the future value or even necessarily whether the performance is going to work as well as we hope. We buy it based on, gross rating points. And we basically say we have this many eyeballs watching this particular TV commercial at this particular time. And it's all guesswork. It's not really appropriately valuing the ad for what it should be doing, right?
Okay, this is like a huge question, right? So, I mean, the challenge is how do you figure out how long is a piece of string, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a little bit of like how much is the creativity and the context worth versus the performance worth? Just the sheer sort of quantitative AI dynamic creative optimization machine worth. It's really hard to answer that. I don't know. I think, this goes back to my, long standing relationship with the creative industry that the creativity drives a better return on investment, which would drive, a different type of valuation.
There's so much loose wiggle room in this when you're talking
Right.
about that type of commercial advertisement, because the media is not sitting alone in a vacuum. It's not like it's like a stock, like what Wall Street deals with, where you have this value that's set by some clear indicators about what the current value is, what the future value is, and what the performance is over time. With this, you have so many variables like what product are you selling versus another product, what creative are you using versus one creative versus another. There's so many variables, you can't ever get to the true value of a direct buy ad, can you?
I'm not sure you can. I mean, I think there's been a lot of hope that we can start to create some common metrics, which I do think will be very helpful, because I think that the challenge is, comparing the value of a Facebook ad versus a Google ad versus an ad on another platform. It's challenging. You're relying on the data that they are providing, and most of the time, and there is the walled garden that tells you, okay, the data is so good or not good or whatever. It's really hard to get a common view of, like, let's just look at things objectively. And then to your point, you add in the creative factors, and who knows, right? That's where you start to say, well, maybe there is value in human ingenuity and robots can't figure everything out. Or maybe they can. Maybe the future is all going to be AI driven creative, and that's going to show us that that's far more efficient than, having copywriters write ads. I don't know.
I think another piece of this is Emily, by the way. There was an article, Bob, that you shared about outstream video ads. And
Yeah,
it
yeah, I
seems
saw
like,
that.
part of this is having a common metric for saying it was successful. And if you're thinking about completion versus just viewability, some of the buyers want it to be completed, but if it's playing out of view, that's not the same as if it's a video ad like on a YouTube video. So there needs to be more
Well,
cohesion when it comes to that.
that adds
You
a
wanna
whole
have
nother wrinkle to the story, Emily, because that gets into ad fraud. That's, I mean, it may not be directly fraudulent to do something like that, but it is still fraudulent to charge someone for an ad that's not completing in the way that you think it's completing. And that's a whole nother wrinkle to the equation. It's whether or not there's integrity in the buy that you're making.
Right. And so share throughs giving their customers the choice to support models where they have pausing or completion. And that just complicates it too, because then you have more reporting, which is, well, this group saw through completion and here were the rates of success. And then we price it this way. It just adds another bit of complexity, I guess, because we have more types of ads. It's not simple TV commercials. There's just so many formats now.
Alexa, there's one thing that always comes up when we have these conversations, and it's the fact that the media buyers and the media sellers continue to not talk to each other. It's something that I mentioned a little bit earlier when I was talking, probing Eli with questions on this. why is it still such a difficult nut for publishers and for ad buyers or advertisers to clearly communicate on a consistent basis what the value propositions are that they're going to be settling on? Why is it such a dark and cloaked mystery why ad deals are getting done?
That's hard because obviously, first off, I work at a creative agency, so our focus is always making the best type of creative that then we hand off to media buyers who go and pick the spots of where it gets distributed. But I think from my former life, when I was working at a native advertising ad tech company, it's really difficult. Someone mentioned it previously because of the data. The data sets don't speak to one another right now, which is becoming ever more frustrating. And so it becomes a very convoluted process when you've got one half of the spectrum looking at one sense of data and then a set of data, and the other looking at other sets, and they don't speak to each other. So the landscape is just a crazy storm at the immediate moment, and I think the goal is to start figuring out how we leverage machine learning and AI, as mentioned previously, to start powering some of those conversations for us instead of trying to get humans to be having those on demand and sort of always on conversations.
And Eli, just to wrap a nice bow on this and kind of move on off of it, the Wall Street model. I mean, it's just like, is the Wall Street model something that can be applied? We talked about it a little bit, but what is this even reasonable to assume that a Wall Street like model is possible for this particular industry?
I think we're a bit far afield from that. To be honest, I think, as we had all just mentioned, there are so many qualitative assessments that go into advertising related to copy and feel and timing and, any number of other things. So I like the idea that we can get closer to it, right? By their speaking common language across the various success metrics and the measurement and having a currency of some kind. But I don't see that happening anytime in the immediate future.
Well, it continues to be a problem and we'll continue to watch it, but we're going to move on and talk next about the ongoing battle over broken trust with agencies. There is, in this ongoing battle toward brands, broken trust with agencies and the moves toward brands in-housing traditional agency-held services comes a new contention. A recent study found that it wasn't trust or transparency deepening this divide. It's actually technology. It's ad tech. In the study by Bannerflow, 96% of top-level marketers believe that the empowerment and cost savings of applying technology solutions in place of outsourcing is always the real culprit. Now, Lynn, if this is the case, and it really did surprise me that so many people in the advertising side decided to weigh in and say that, they weren't interested in the fact that there was no transparency. They were more interested in the technology that's being offered to them and the empowerment it gives them. Is all the industry hand-wringing over issues of kickbacks and transparency just a distraction from the real problems here? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I have to point out that this study was commissioned by Bannerflow, who's an ad tech company, right? So,
Of course.
I mean, kind of ironic that they're like, yeah, technology's the answer, So I'll just find the whole okay, there's a lot of pieces to the in-house thing. It's not as simple as, oh, we're just going to put in a workflow management tool and eliminate some project management people at the agency side and save some money. It's just not that simple. There are lots of different types of technology that that can be brought in-house, but there's also the creative side and the human side that, that's the bigger frustration when agencies feel like the creative itself, the ideas themselves are being done in-house. We saw what happened with Pepsi. I'm sure there are lots of examples of things where, it's really hard to have creative people who are objective and stimulated and really, able to bring just holistic ideas when they're working for one place for several years. So I think the in-house question is big. I think if I was going to sum it up, I would say it's really easy. It's like a really easy thing to say, oh, it's just technology's fault. Because like we could blame them for everything, literally. I could blame them for so many things in my life right now. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's technology's fault. I think the in-house thing is driven more by efficiency than anything else. I think it's a procurement exercise to shave costs and save money. And that's just my bias, but that's where I believe the real gravity of the in-house movement is happening.
I hear what you're saying. It's not as easy as just turning on a switch and having some kind of technology solve all your problems. Basically give you the efficiency and empower you to have more control over your advertising. I mean, there's a lot of work involved with that and a lot of complication. And quite frankly, a lot of brands aren't capable of stepping up and doing that without the help of their agencies. However, what this is saying is that when it does happen, it's technology driving it. It's not transparency. And yeah, I'm skeptical of Bannerflow putting this study out, but that one stat is kind of remarkable when you think about it, because it's saying that all this hand-wringing that the agency world has done over transparency, trying to prove their transparency and how much the A&A has been coming at the 4As and the complications between the two groups over whether or not transparency is being effectively managed throughout the industry. It seems like all of that is just a waste of time if it's technology that's driving the decision. And for me, that's what was so, earth-shaking when I read this.
I mean, I guess it's just, again, it's like, what are they bringing in-house? Are they bringing media capabilities? Because yes, that's a transparency issue. Or are they bringing creative capabilities and content capabilities and social media capabilities in-house? And that's where, it is a little different, because if it's media, yeah, I completely get it. But I think the big issue where you start to, at least the creative agencies have issues with the 4As, not the 4As, the A&A. You go to the A&A conference and they're literally talking about how great in-house marketing can be. But it's when you're trying to bring the creative product in-house that I think is a bigger challenge. So I think there's when people talk about in-house, it's a huge bucket, and I think we have to separate it out as to like what are the different slices of in-house that you could have. There's certainly the media side, there's the production side, there's the operational side, there's the workflow management side, there's creative side. There's lots of different pieces, and they're not all equal.
Eli, you come from the other side of this. You come from the ad tech world. So tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this. Is tech driving most of the decisions that you're seeing being made, or is it also just a lot of people upset and frustrated with the type of accountability they're getting with their agencies? Is that still an issue for them?
Well, I think there's arguments to be made across all of this, but to me, I think of it, putting aside, I think tech has a play in it, but I think of it more of it as like a data and a data analysis issue, right? Because to me, the brands that we deal with that take a lot of stuff in-house, and these tend to be larger multinational type of brands, they have their own data science teams that are actually crunching data in order to come up with not only quantitative, but also qualitative insights as far as strategy. So in an organization like that, I feel like tends to be a little bit less trusting of their agency if the agency isn't doing the same. That's at least in my experience, what I've seen. So, and also then sort of flip it on the other end is that there's any number of huge companies that have very small data science or non-existent data science teams, and then large ad agencies that have incredibly robust data science and tech platforms of their own. So to me, it's less about the tech itself that would be concerned about. It's more about, can anybody help figure out what the data means, right? And that is where I think a lot of the distrust happens, is, are we reading the tea leaves appropriately?
Alexa, I want to get your thoughts on this as well, because agencies need to respond to this evolution that's going on in the marketplace, and they need to respond to it strategically. I'm not sure what kind of impact in-housing has had on you or the agency you work for, But how does an agency in general respond to a situation where you're facing a lot of in-housing of services and you're trying to battle a technology solution with what you are basically offering on your side?
Yeah, so I actually have to agree completely with Lynn about what she said of what facet of the organization is being sort of empowered by technology, because it really does make a difference. And the reason is just from actually experience within our agency. We've had many clients who have taken business in-house and have given it a shot and sort of come crawling back to us saying, we screwed up. We didn't realize, everything that goes into building a brand and the level of storytelling and creativity that powers sort of all of your touch points of the experience. And that really is where creativity shines through. And I just firmly do not believe that a machine can produce what a group of 10 people around the table sort of sussing through not only data-driven processes, but really just that level of collective wisdom. It's just different when you're able to bring that to the table. And it's something that we do extremely well and pride ourselves on, and is sort of the key to challenging what can be done with technology.
Yeah, just to counter that though for a second, I mean, yeah, everything you say is true. An agency may lose some of the business because of in-housing. In-housing goes poorly for the brand, and then the brand comes back to the agency and says, that was really tough. We need your help. We need you to come back involved. I'm sure that happens every day. But there are lots of companies out there that successfully integrate all of their services in-house. They figure out a way to do it efficiently, effectively, and still maintain creativity. And we all know the brands out there that do this. So, it's just like, is it just a matter of management?
But what brands do you think actually do that? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, brands like Target continually have maintained control over their own brand. I mean, sure, they work with outside shops, but
external agencies. That's the thing. It's like how much, at what point do you need and a little external jolt, a little boost, a little creativity, infusion. I mean, I'd like to know, like, are there any companies that are doing everything in-house really successfully?
So I think when we talk about in-house, the ones that do it well are the ones that are building that from the ground up. So it's not the big agencies that are kind of taking it and saying, you know what, never mind, we don't need an agency, let's bring it in-house. It's the companies like a Casper or like Birchbox who have sort of grown from the ground up and created that entire ecosystem from day one. That's who I think is doing it well. And the main reason is they were built that way. It started from, the minute they became a company. So whether we want to label it a startup or not, but I don't know that there's a lot of brands that have flipped that funnel and brought everything in-house that are doing it well, that are the big, Fortune 500 type of companies.
Right. And I think it's interesting that the brands you mentioned, Red Antler has been very sort of
yes,
publicly associated with those, right? So they did use outside resources to get to a place where they could have these successful brands, right?
And every brand, no matter how, even when they're starting off taking control of their brand work, if they're taking control of their marketing completely and doing everything in-house. I mean, I think of Amazon, who started off that and was famous for saying they don't want to work with advertising, they don't want to work with agencies. Even they got to a point where they got so big that they needed to use and rely on outside partners. But at the same time, they continue to maintain control over most of their marketing internally. And it seems like even though a lot of brands that try to flip that funnel and try to bring this stuff in-house when they've been depending on agencies may fail at first, it doesn't mean that they're going to fail forever. It's a matter of management. It's a matter of culture. It's a matter of shifting those culture and shifting the management outside insights into how you're going to be managing your marketing budget going forward. I mean, all of these factors come into play, and it's possible, I mean, it's conceivable that, you could successfully bring in-house everything. It's not it's not impossible to believe that technology could, enable a company to get past that hump, to find a way to, pipeline the work throughout their system and to effectively manage the change. I mean, it's not completely not understandable. I'm not really sure what I'm saying, but well, anyway,
We agree, Bob. It's not impossible. It's just unlikely.
well, how should agencies respond to this? Is it just a matter of just doing what Alexa said, which is you let them go, you let them fail, you let them come back, you continue to hold up a relationship? Is that the strategy to go forward with, or is there something more direct that you could be doing?
I mean, I definitely think agencies, we tend to be, our own worst enemies in terms of, valuing new business above promoting the industry, and that's challenging, because you're sort of on the race to the bottom a little bit. So if you had a more industry perspective on things, for sure, I think you would see a boomerang back, because at the end of the day, like I've had the same experience Alexa had, which is, clients go, oh my God, we're going to save so much money because we're going to hire our own copywriters, and we're going to have project managers, we're going to have producers, we're going to do our own content. And then they do it and it's not as good. And guess what? They're not getting as many, people engaging with their content, and therefore the ROI is not as good. And then they wonder, like, well, okay, clearly we're not doing something right. But I mean, this is where I think that the ad industry, I hate to call it the ad industry, but the idea industry, whatever we are these days, needs to figure out a better way to value what we bring to the table, because creativity is the difference between, in my opinion, like huge success or mediocrity. It really is. And so, like, you're either going to hit it out of the park because you have a really kick-ass idea, or it's going to be and and that's where I think clients are missing the point on the in-house piece, because they don't value that delta that I'm talking about.
Right. Well, it makes perfect sense. Well, I want to talk next about Spotify buying Gimlet Media for over $200 million, because it's just the latest move of the biggest players in online audio consolidating the podcasting space. Now, this is near and dear to my heart, but my question, Alexa, is that what happens to the open distribution of content within this new model? I mean, does it help or hurt to have one of these players become a YouTube for audio? And will we continue to see podcasting exist as an open medium where it can be downloaded via many different sources, or is it going to consolidate into channels as it seems to be doing with this Spotify buy?
Yeah, so this was a really, really exciting week. WPP, which is Gray's holding company, was an original investor in Gimlet Media, and we have a really great partnership with BetaWorks, who are also investors in Gimlet. And also, just want to take a step back, that Spotify double acquired not only Gimlet Media but Anchor as well. So Anchor is sort of so Anchor is like the creation and distribution for sort of smaller independent podcasters, and Gimlet is a little bit more of the storytelling kind of HBO-esque podcasts. But anyways, this is a huge time right now for audio experiences, podcasting in general. It's definitely the new frontier of not only how we're consuming content, but how people are experiencing brands, and so advertisers, as it may be. And I hopefully we're all heavy users of podcasts, but the way that it's currently been, I'm actually a huge proponent of some level of consolidation, because right now, I think it's gotten very frustrating to have to be flipping through multiple different platforms to access all of the different content that you want to experience. And what's interesting about the Spotify move is sort of two things. The first is that they have already built in different tiers of monetization opportunities. So they have their free model, which you then could access the podcasts from a free tier. But then they also have their monetized and sort of paywalls that then have another level of content access. And they also have a data platform already in place with sort of advertising built in. And so we think, or at least, kind of the whole cohort that has discussed about why this is such a huge deal, is this will really allow advertisers to start to learn who is listening to their podcasts, where and when, and not their podcast, but just podcasts in general, so that they can actually make better decisions of where they place their ads in those podcasts. And to that, the last point too is the audio medium is changing how we experience ads, and it's really, really important for brands and advertisers to recognize that having a quick sort of sponsored by is not the same of having this native, powerful storytelling vehicle. And I know we'll talk a little bit about this, about just sort of sound and sonic branding and how that's going to play directly into the podcast medium as well. So I think it's a huge opportunity to make media more effective. It includes a new touch point that really is all encompassing, because with our move into in-ear wearables and sort of always on consumption, this is a huge opportunity, so long as it's done well by the brands that are playing in the space.
I agree completely. This is Emily. So Apple captures over half of all podcast listening, but it doesn't share listener level data. Having these other platforms and players taking on more of the pie means advertisers will get better data. And, even though the host read is typically a better generator of ROI, the host endorsement that is, versus a programmatic insertion, we'll be able to see a lot more about what works and on whom and when and where.
I agree with all that you're both saying so far, but I'm also wondering whether or not what we're really creating is channels. We're creating Spotify, which will have all these programs that are developed by what was Gimlet Media and is now part of the Spotify family. I mean, are we going to be seeing channels start to develop where you have to tune into Spotify to get these certain programs? And is that good for the entire industry as a whole? Because consider what's happened with things like CBS All Access, which has tried to come into this space on the television side of the equation and to, gatekeep this content as opposed to distributing it via Hulu or one of the other aggregators like Netflix. Instead, it's going and it's trying to establish its own little fiefdom. It seems like that's ultimately what the plan for Gimlet is in the Spotify scheme. I can't see any other reason why they would have gone for somebody like Gimlet.
You're probably right, but I mean, that's unfortunate if it does become walled off like that. Part of the beauty of having different podcast players is they have different features. Some people like Overcast, they like speeding it up. Someone listening to this show might right now be at a 1.25 or 1.5x. I love speeding them up. You can't do that on every player. And then something like a Stitcher has this great recommendation engine. That's going to be huge, because looking at somebody's habits and preferences, which is most possible when they typically stay within a certain podcast player or app of choice that gets richer data that way, that's going to make them want to stay there longer. So, with Spotify and Gimlet, if you can only get Reply All and Startup by listening through Spotify, and Spotify has a good recommendation engine, then people will be pretty okay with that. But it's a problem if, you're on Stitcher and you want to hear that show, but you can't.
I agree. And to your point about the recommendation engine, the beauty of this, the hope is that they won't wall everything off and that this will kind of play all together. But we're going to get some really interesting ideas around what type of music are people listening to, and therefore what podcasts would they enjoy, what are the typical times of the day that they are listening to their Spotify account or opening their Spotify account, what are they listening to, what is potentially the contextual environment that they're in. So are they on their commute to work, are they at home and cooking in their kitchen? And that is just going to be where advertisers can, when they ingest that data, really make the ads mean more to the consumer who's listening to it, and really create like an emotional connection that feels almost one-to-one. And without the Spotify engine powering that type of experience is not happening right now. So I really do stand by it's an extraordinary move in the space.
Eli, any thoughts on this at this point? I mean, does this make the media more or less effective for advertisers? Does this move concern you in any way, that maybe podcasting could be bottlenecked into channels as opposed to being able to be accessed via any podcast player? Is RSS finished? What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, listen, on a personal level, whatever allows me the easiest access to cool content, would be ideal. But if I look at it from the lens of what's more effective for advertisers, this just goes back to what we talked about over the last couple of pieces around like measurement. The more that things are rolled up into mega properties, the easier it is for third-party objective research firms to analyze them, right? Like when things are fragmented into a lot of different publishers or delivery vehicles, and not only is sample size a problem, but just, critical mass of, like, say, am I going to build a product for these things? So I think it makes it more effective simply because it goes back to the more mega properties that are consolidated together in any space. And let's take podcasting as the one we're focusing on. It's just better downstream. That said, it does also hurt what is that discovery phase, because you may be recommended only like the top things, the hot things, a limited set, just what exists within that walled garden. So it may be great for the top end, but not for everybody.
Good points. Well, final topic, an idea I first heard on this show in a conversation between Tamsin and Tom Webster and myself about brands needing to adopt an audio branding strategy, or an audio logo per se, to prepare for the wave of voice-based technologies, which in turn led to an article I wrote on Medium, seems to have been a bit prescient. Yes, I am tooting my own horn for all of this. MasterCard introduced their audio branding this week. Not sure if they heard about it first here, but I would like to think so. So, Emily, is the effort still largely theatrics, or does it indicate a leading edge of something much, much bigger? What's your take on this?
It's a leading edge, 100%. So smart speakers are the fastest growing consumer technology of all time. They've grown faster than the smartphone, reaching 50% adoption in just a few years. There is no indicator that this is just a trend or a fad. When you think about audio and voice, this is your customer's first language. The first experience that they had with the sensory world was in the womb, hearing their mother's voice. So for a brand to really reach consumers and kind of crawl into their ear, as I say, they have to have a strong sonic identity. This is a great play for MasterCard. Something else that they did, which was pretty creative, is they made it global. So this is, I think it's about a 6-note short sound, this sonic logo, but they have different adaptations of the melody for various genres. So they have an Indian one, there's a more Mexican sounding one for use all around the world. It's going to be so powerful because you think about fewer than 1% of transactions are cash. Everybody is swiping their card. Every time you swipe your card, you're going to hear this if it's a MasterCard. And it's going to be so evocative of that brand and so powerful, like more so than any visual brand identity can be. And it will be experienced in a way that the brain processes faster than any other medium.
I like the way you frame this because in one sense, people to always, even I set this up as a voice topic, but it doesn't necessarily have to do just about voice. It has to do with the fact that the ears are an important part of the experience that we have with a brand. And, I always go back to the TV commercial story that I had where I would hear this TV commercial in the background because I was busy on my phone, and I just ignored it until suddenly I heard a roller coaster, And I turned to the screen and the commercial's over before I could get any information about what exactly this ad was about. And it was because the audio was playing, the audio was not grabbing me in an interesting way until the last moment, and then it was too late to grab me. I think that that's true with so many different opportunities throughout the marketing and advertising world. You end up with these moments where your consumer is not paying attention to the screen, not looking at the page, not looking at whatever's physically in front of them, but they hear that sound and they remember something. They're if it's significant or unique enough, they'll remember their experience with your brand because of it. I think that's just plain brilliant. Alexa, I mean, this is something that you deal with every day as well in the innovation space at Gray. I mean, do you see more of your brands moving in this direction and looking for some kind of sonic identity?
Oh my goodness, absolutely. It's funny. Just this past week, we had a great company called Man Made Music, who has this sonic branding incubator called Venture Sonic. We had them come in and talk to our agency just about the power of this next frontier of really owning your brand. And if you think about it, think about like the Netflix dun 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 that happens when you're binge watching the TV. It is just so iconic and ownable that no one else can take it away, and it creates this level of attachment to the brand. And the team that came in had told us that 86% of people can basically decide whether they want to engage or avoid an experience based on the emotional response that they have to a sound. So the fact that you now get to hear your MasterCard as you swipe it, and it gives you, let's call it like a high, you will continue to do that, and it's really ownable. I mean, this is to your point about, again, the power of audio and our switch into in-ear wearables. We really have to start focusing on how the brain responds to sound and the type of emotional response that creates, because it really can drive loyalty and positive experience toward a brand.
And Lynn, this is not something new, is it? Because I mean, it's just like, as much as I'd like to take credit for it, I was being facetious. I mean, you can go back to every jingle that McDonald's has ever had. I mean, they're right now running da 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 da. I mean, it's just like, as soon as you hear it, you know you're listening to a McDonald's ad. It's an auditory identity, and it's so important in every single brand. I just don't think that brands have elevated it in terms of their thinking. They've thought of it as a mnemonic and not necessarily core to the brand identity.
I'm so glad you said that, because honestly, I'm just so calling BS on this whole like, oh, we're capitalizing on this audio trend. Because if you really look at the way things have been for years, whether it's Intel and that very simple, I mean, we all know those notes, whether it's freaking like Double Mint Gum, for God's sake, or State Farm. I mean, there's so many brands, Alka-Seltzer, you could go on and on, that I think have recognized for years that there is a branding strategy that's bigger than just a visual approach, right? That it's got multi layers to it. So I do think this is not new. I think it's BS to say that it is, honestly, big time. I think that yes, you can make it into a more experiential part of the brand, which is where brands are going. So I kind of look at audio as like a given. I mean, honestly, if a brand hasn't figured that out, like, shame on them.
Well, but that's exactly the thing. I don't think that a lot of brands have figured that out. I think that their agencies have helped them by doing sonic identity, but not really elevating it to the fact of saying, this is your sonic logo, this is what it means. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but at the same time, it puts an importance on the audio that has not been there prior to this. I mean, it really.
Some brands. I mean, again, like, there are so many examples of brands that actually have it already, frankly, and maybe some have lost it, and maybe not everyone thinks holistically in terms of a 360 brand experience. But it's bigger than audio. That's my point. Is like, if you really want to think about a holistic customer experience, audio is one piece of it. By the way, scent marketing is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. Are we
totally?
I mean, how many stores do you walk into and they have their own scent and it is like a distinctive, cool, like, so I think it's more about, in my head, a multi-sensory, holistic experience than just an audio thing, which feels so freaking old. Like, yeah, no shit. We've done that forever.
It
And
is kind of a no shit thing, but a lot of brands have no sonic identity and they have to catch up because there's a 2-year learning curve for a customer to associate a sound with a brand. MasterCard will come faster than 2 years because it's going to be played so often. If you think of the text message tritone chime on the iPhone, that sends a signal into your body. You actually have a stress response to it. I think the idea of scent that you mentioned is really interesting, but we're moving away from physical retail and it's becoming a lot more digital. If you think about voice shopping, it tripled in holiday season 2018 over prior year. So for a brand to put emphasis on figuring out their sonic identity makes a lot of sense because we're going to be doing more commerce with our voices.
yeah, no, I don't disagree at all. I just don't think it's a new idea.
And with that, it's time for the Ad Fill 5. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do a shameless plug, starting with the voices you just heard. Emily Binder, you can find her at beetlemoment.com, which is spelled B-E-E-O-L. I'll have it in the links. You don't have to do that. But anyway, Emily, I'm fumbling through this, but take it away. Tell us what you'd like to promote.
Voice marketing, that is what I focus on. And I've been helping a bunch of clients with strategy, focusing on Amazon and Google and some of the other voice assistants. Essentially, right now, this is not a time to be sitting and wasting and trying to figure out what should we do? Should we invest here? Because you absolutely should. It is the future. So it's beetlemoment.com, Beetle with 2 E's. You can reach out to me there. You can see case studies of some of the work I've done. And also get my flash briefing, which is called the Beetle Moment Marketing Flash Briefing on Amazon Alexa.
And thank you for more eloquently talking about Beetle. I was trying to say it's not like the Beatles, but it didn't quite come out. Anyway, Alexa DePasquale, you can find her at gray.com. That's where she is the Senior Vice President of Innovation. Tell us what's going on in your world, Alexa. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, Gray, we're fantastic. And if you need advertising services, please do come. We're really pushing how we become true agency business partners. But, two shameless things. First is if you want to follow my fitness journey, you can follow me on Instagram. It's FLEXYD. There's tons of squats and bench pressing that happens. And second is, this is not shameless, but I cannot recommend enough the book Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, because it has completely transformed how my 2019 has started. So I hope it does the same for everyone listening.
Okay, well,
that's so funny. I just tweeted that out this week. I tweeted it because Mitch Joel recommended that book on this show, I think a couple of years ago, and I completely agree.
Yeah. Okay, there you go. It's the absolute best. I can't say it enough.
That's the Beetle moment. I'm going to send you this tweet. I love it.
Please do. That's amazing.
Now, next up, we have Eli Goodman. You can find him at jumpshot.com. Tell us what's going on in your world, Eli. What would you like to promote?
Yeah, I just like to promote JumpShot. Just for anybody that's not familiar, we are a market research firm. We have a proprietary sample of 100 million users worldwide, spread out across desktops, smartphones, and tablets, around 50 million desktop, 50 million mobile. And we have the daily click stream. Every website those people visit, search term they use, video they watch, product they buy, and we build product off of it. So if anybody's interested, just reach out to me, eli.goodman@jumpshot.com. And
it's really impressive stuff, people, so you should definitely check it out. Last but not least, Lynn Power. You can find her at thehmsbeagle.com. That's the consultancy that she co-founded with Joe Jaffe. Tell us, what would you like to promote, Lynn?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're really focused on helping brands survive. It's not a given. It's not a right. It's a privilege. And lots of brands and companies we're working with don't quite understand that. So we're helping them figure out not just survival, but thrive, what we call thrival these days. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds fantastic. And yeah, you guys are doing some amazing things. I've been following your your Twitter streams and your Instagram streams and all the cool stuff you're doing. You've been traveling all over the world, Lynn, so it's really interesting stuff.
Easy. I know. I'm going to Palm Springs next week, but it's like always somewhere. Yeah.
And as for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on the program. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for the Ad Fail 5, a rundown of the lowest moments in advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. And first up, a TechCrunch expose talks about an all too common practice of big brand app developers recording every in-app action, many without asking for permission first, Eli. And in case you are wondering what the big deal is, Air Canada was not only doing this, but it was found that they weren't properly masking the data, exposing names and passport numbers to the wild. So, Eli, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is actually a very personal topic to me from a business perspective, because we talk about this pretty much every single day, right? Which is when you're gathering up third-party research data, people had better know that it's being tracked, as well as the fact that whatever the mechanism is that you're tracking them with, it also should have to track it as a result of whatever the purpose of that app or product is, right? So I think that to me is why this has been terrible PR. And I remember this happened with all sorts of organizations over the past bunch of years. Unroll Me, I think of it, a big thing that happened with the Wall Street Journal. And then obviously we're talking Air Canada. So this is a huge no-no, right? For somebody that worries about privacy and doing things above board, is that you cannot be tracking data and then actually like executing and using that data in some capacity unless the purpose of what you're doing with them is to track that information.
Well, next up, we finally have insight into why Reddit is such a bargain for advertisers, Lynn. An analysis of the recent funding filings pegs the user value at about 30 cents, and even Snap is over $2 per user. I don't know whether to make fun of them or say, good job for at least appropriately valuing what the user's worth to us.
I mean, it is kind of interesting because it does feel like finally somebody's had an honest assessment of what a company is worth, right? Usually there's such an inflated sort of perspective on things. But I'm really not that surprised. And, look, Reddit is like cool. Everyone always says like, oh, you got to be in Reddit. It's cool. But at the end of the day, like what my clients care about, I think what most clients care about is ROI, right? Like how are we really going to make sure that we're building the conversion in the funnel to drive the sales we need? And if Reddit is not the place, Reddit's not the place.
And not only that, brand safety when you're talking about Reddit, which is a whole other question when you're dealing with the Reddit audience.
Totally.
Well, still worried about the Equifax breach? You should be, because 17 months later, Alexa, we still don't know who has the data, and some people are starting to suspect it was a foreign government, which is really kind of scary when you think about it.
Yes, it is. This whole stat and reading all of this news freaked me out a little bit. We can land things on the moon, but somehow can't figure out where the data went. My real hope is that blockchain technology will help to, solve some of these challenges as we get deeper down into the applications of it. But for now, I am definitely rethinking how my data is getting out into the world. That's for sure.
Now, next up, proving once again that advertisers have no soul, analysts expect that there will be no appreciable drop in ad spend at the National Enquirer, Emily, even after it's been all but officially verified that they tried to blackmail Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, this is just incorrigible, and I'm so glad that he publicized everything. I love what he wrote on Medium, and he said, help me fix this, prioritize my time. I have bigger fish to fry. I shouldn't have to deal with this. It is insane. I don't know who's still buying it. It's not the kind of person that is really thinking deep. So those advertisers, that's their clientele, that's their customer. It will just keep happening.
And last but not least, Amazon just pulled out of its commitment to putting a new HQ in New York City. They claimed it was over community opposition, but then we found out, Eli, that it may have been more a bit may have been a bit of union busting as well. And as Adweek pointed out, the optics of breaking up on Valentine's are just terrible. They actually broke up with New York City on Valentine's Day. What a perfect timing for this announcement.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just a couple comments as a New Yorker and somebody that works in tech. There were absolutely things on a personal level that would have been great for me, right? Like certainly I work in tech. I'm all about there being more competition and more jobs. And also I live and own a condo less than a mile and a half from where that would have flopped out, right? So again, but I'll say this, I am actually a big believer in companies like that in the same way that billionaires do not need public funding in order to help them build their sports team stadiums and whatnot. I felt that New York played hardball, and Amazon just decided to, I think, as de Blasio said, pick up their ball and go home. And to be perfectly frank, I sat with a friend last night who used to work at Amazon for a long time, and he said whatever the public story is, he doubts that that's the actual reason. Right, that this is probably they wanted to get out for some other reason, and then this was something that they wanted to use. So I'm kind of curious to see how it plays out from here.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's the union story that was the main driver. The fact that they were going to be embroiled in some union discussions that were going to affect both locations, both the warehouse location they have in Staten Island and the new corporate headquarters, so no surprise there. Well, have something to add to this list or just want to discuss it, comment online, use the hashtag #AdFail5, that's pound, AdFail, and the number 5. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
You know what I mean? It's like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. It's just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know, like if it's, you know, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.